Hi, everybody. This is Kevin Sabrin with Rethinking Everything and the Rethinking Dad blog. I'm here today with my really good friend, Melissa Rivera, friend of the family. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody.
So this is first opportunity to have a guest live and in studio. Everybody else has been on a webcast, but fortunately, Melissa and her family live close to us here in Tampa, St. Pete. So this is a really neat opportunity to get to spend some time together. Melissa's not a big fan of video, so we're going to try this, and she's being very patient with me. If this comes across as audio, this part will be edited, and you will never know. So we're just going to have a chat. Basically, I wanted everybody to have a chance to get to know Melissa, those of you that weren't at the conference last year. And Melissa's good enough to join us again this year. We're going to have a bunch of interesting talks and exciting conversation. So I hope so, too. First thing I want to ask you about is sacred feminine. Can you give us a top line, what does sacred feminine mean to you?
Well, I think historically, over the past few thousand years, we have lived under this system of domination called patriarchy. And what has been the qualities of the feminine, both divine and human, have been marginalized and maligned. And so remembering that the feminine lives in all of us and is an essential component for full, robust experience on the planet is to remember that. So remembering how sacred the feminine is in living a fully realized existence. And so the feminine looks like, what does that look like? What does that mean? It means that, so the masculine it's more organized, linear, not organized so much, but linear, focused, deliberate, strategic, logical, and achievement, accomplishment oriented. And then the feminine is more spontaneous, more creative, more unexpected, more circular, more, I think more connected in a way, and embodied. It's sensory, it's emotional, and there's an intelligence and a necessity for that on the planet the same as the other. And when they're married, right, so there's the sacred marriage, which is what ancient cultures have often revered and was an integral part of daily living. So it wasn't like that we put sacred feminine high on some kind of pedestal that we do once in a while. There were spiritual practices that were woven into the tapestry of daily living. But anyway, the sacred marriage, and when those are married, not only between people, but within ourselves, that I think is when we really come alive.
You say remembering. What do you mean by remembering?
I think that we have forgotten. So I think that science, let's put it this way, I think science is catching up to these ancient wisdom traditions. So science is now showing that energy, when we die or when things die, things don't disappear, energy shifts, right? Science is now showing also that the heart has an electromagnetic field thousands of times more powerful than the one that comes off of the brain. So we prioritize and socially sanction and the brain, and there was this sort of division between not only masculine and feminine, but those qualities in all of us. But then when you wrap patriarchy around that, then it was men and women, right? And so we have these systems of domination. So we thought logic and reason we elevated that above feeling and intuition. We valued the neck up instead of the entire body. And there's a whole, like Gabrielle Roth, my mentor who's since passed, and the founder of Five Rhythms, says there's an entire wilderness from all the way down to our feet, but we actually don't really ever consciously place attention on our feet, even if we just did that in the day and just felt our feet on the earth. There's a certain kind of grounding that so we're detached, we're not tethered to our truth and our souls, is the way that I think about it. So if we could remember these things, I think So that's just one example about embodiment, about emotionalism, the heart versus
Right.
the head, and women, the way we're designed, right? The womb, the heart, and biologically we're now learning, for example, science is showing that we have all of these connections that when they're aligned, then when we are kind of tuned into the womb wisdom and our heart's deepest desires, women's, for example, our brains fire up so that we are more connected, creative, confident, clear, directed, but we forget that nurturing and nourishing and tending the soil of our souls, which really lives in all of our flesh, we forget that, right? So dance puts us back into that when we have sort of this
Right.
deep conversation. When we're in nature, we remember that. When we tell stories from our experiences, we remember. So it's all of these ways and literally remember. So there's a story about the goddess Isis,
Mm-hmm.
and an Egyptian goddess whose husband was killed and dismembered, and his body parts were put all over the planet. And she went around finding them and putting him back together. And the idea was that she was remembering, right, this masculine, feminine dynamic, put him back together, gave him a golden treasure, and then they conceived their son Horus, who is the sun god.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's an archetypal story, so that there's a literal remembering, and then there's a remembering that this sacred marriage really matters, and we're forgetting half of the story, not just half the population in terms of women, but also men, right? Everybody has to remember this element, these energies that live in us.
You know, typical in our conversations, there's about 5 jumping in points there that I wanted to ask you more things. So I'll try to remember them as we go.
I'm happily interrupted.
Yeah, well, no, I don't want to stop you. First thing is you triggered a thought about tribes. And the value of the story and carrying a story forward, or downstream, if you will. And I think today about tribes, and maybe in the way an unschooling tribe, even a conference like Rethinking, could potentially offer that tribal-like component of story sharing, passing of wisdom. It's nice that we have blended genders and all sorts of different folks coming there. Tell me about tribes today. Where are we lacking tribes? Where could they benefit? How could it help us?
Yeah, I think that it's really, Seth Godin talks a lot about tribes, and his idea is that people come around a certain set of principles or desires or interests, right? Whatever the curiosity is, and people sort of come together. But it's difficult because when you read wisdom from anthropologists that talk about living in tribes back in the day, there were shared values. And so I think it's important for the definition of tribe is to have some kind of essential values that are shared, and have conversations about what that means, right? Is how do you live that out? So you can't say something generic like respect, right? You say, so what does that look like in real time? Because what happens beautifully in tribes, and I think unschooling is a space I think that our families have definitely, is that all of the adults are responsible for all of the children, right? And so we're not there's not this kind of myopic nuclear family Western model of understanding being together, right? It's that we all are coming together in service of this greater experience, in RE, for example, unschooling, and that there is enough overlap and safety so that I can trust that you can honor the sort of central value when you interact with my child when I'm not around, so that it gives you epic freedom to be able to do that. But I think it's very difficult because people they have their platitudes around what their values are, and then they don't define them specifically enough so that people can have that sense of safety.
The safety to be able to move freely around the tribe with distance between you and your kids. It's one of the things we try to incorporate into the conference. I know over the years it's been part of the vibe there that families looked out for their kiddos, but other ones, children.
Super important.
It is. Develop that safe container for people to unravel or explore or have the freedom to investigate different topics. You need to know that your crew is safe. So Peter Gray wrote recently, I don't know if you caught this article or not, but in tribal experience, there was, at least in his writing, this particular tribe, and I can't pronounce the tribe, there was a tendency towards mocking or making sure that all tribal members were kept very humble.
Yeah.
Is that, are you familiar with that concept, and do you understand the importance of that?
Well, I think that you want to make sure that people, that would be a way of sort of keeping boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. So that everybody stays in a particular container. That's kind of the shared values. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it would work in the same way mm-hmm. in under modern conditions. But there have to be articulated boundaries, I guess, is what is the container that we're holding, that we all feel comfortable holding, and where are they fluid? Mm-hmm. Where are they not so much rigid, but kind of, we want to honor them. It's kind of about dignity and honor and integrity for whatever you're talking about. But yeah, I think that there's a way cultures have done this all the time of socially sanctioning something mm-hmm. and then sort of mocking mm-hmm. something else as a way to discourage the behavior.
Yeah.
However, because of the feminine, back to the sacred feminine, right. There's an emotion under that, right? So you might now stop the behavior on the surface, but underneath there's all this emotional turmoil, and that's mapping itself onto the body as some kind of trauma. And so I wouldn't want to replicate that all the way unless we're looking at elevating both feminine and masculine energies.
That exists for guys too. Yeah. We may internalize it differently. And, the channel that was acceptable when we were young, one of the few channels that us men were sort of allowed was anger.
Yeah.
So, you don't usually see a young lad having a problem with an expression of anger.
Yes.
It's not as uncommon, but, break down in tears over something or something like that, and it's, quickly shunned.
You're armoring up. There's bravado there to protect the tender spots. Of course.
Does that go back to, is that a carryover from tribal times where toughen up, we've got to go eat what we kill today?
I don't think so. Let's just say the literature, the anthropological literature that I've sort of perused over the years talks more about the fact that everything's acceptable, kind of things are welcome, but once you're of a certain age, I'm not going to coddle you. Mm-hmm. You're responsible to contribute to the tribe, right? And at the same time, anything you need, any adult or older person, an older sibling or cousin or another, an older young person in the tribe can help take care of it if you're injured but what I understood, and this is back to Continuum and Jean Liedloff, and there are tons of people, and Meredith Small, and there are lots of people who have written about these, is that in caring for young people or children, the lap is always open. Mm. You're always welcome, regardless of age, to come into the lap. However, when it's time to get stuff done, you have to also contribute. So I'm not taking, so the whole idea of continuum concept, right, is that they're with you, you're taking care of them. But once they're walking and eating and doing their things, they're also playing and participating in the life of the tribe. So my feeling is that most tribes apprentice because you're learning all the time. Like Barbara Rogoff wrote about this when she did all this work on learning naturally, right? So it's kind of like unschooling. She doesn't call it that. And she's a scholar, but she has studied this. And what she learned was that because adults and young people are constantly interacting, mm-hmm. they're being apprenticed at all times, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no kind of need to... Tell me your question. What was the question? I'm circling back to that with Rogoff.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking because, it's funny because I can't remember it because when you said continuum, so I'll remember it. When you said continuum, I started thinking of that scene, or in my mind it was a scene, when in the book, the Jean was describing the ladies walking to fetch water.
Yeah.
And I quickly connected that to the embodiment that you talked about earlier in the sacred feminine. And this notion of why don't we just, the men or whomever at the time were saying, or somebody in sort of advanced culture, if you will.
Oh, you were talking about men toughening up. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Thank
what
you.
It was.
Yeah,
yes.
We got it.
Men toughening up. So the idea, what I'm saying is I think young men or young people in tribe, they are not, it's not the same script or narrative that we have to have here, because they don't have to toughen up, because all the way through they're seeing how life works. They're imbued with the values because they're shared.
Right.
And they don't have to necessarily navigate that part of their existence. And so they gradually grow up almost like in an apprentice or, situation. So that when they're young people, there's no toughening up. They know what's required of them. They've been apprenticed. They've been mentored organically, right? You don't even have to sit. Mentorship is kind of an artificial way of saying what actually happens in these tribes. So I'm not so sure, but they do have to, but by the same token, there was a story, I can't remember who told this one, of in certain tribes, and let's not be, all these tribes and indigenous cultures are not homogenous, right? So there's a variety within them, so let's just be clear. But there was one that said, keep up, or we're going, you can hang, and if you can't hang, that's your problem, right? So yes, that's a little bit of tough love. I don't think that's uniform across all indigenous cultures and tribes.
It strikes me that was Inuit or one of the sort of early tribal groups in sort of Alaska or the
maybe because so life is hard, right? They're in the elements, they're working hard.
Right. You have to keep up. At some point, we can't carry it.
Correct.
So
and so back to I'm going to riff off your sacred feminine women, because I was talking with Kelly about this and Sarah yesterday, I think, and we were talking about how women, right, in villages where the water was far away, women would have to walk and get the water, and it seemed inefficient. It was. And then sort of modern society came in and created a water system so that no longer had to exist. And what they unanticipated side effect of that was that the women used that time to share stories, to bond, to do each other's hair, to sort of, some of it was kind of soul story sharing, and some of it was beautification. Some of it was just tending physically to each other and tending emotionally and spiritually to one another. And they lost that. Stripped
away their chance to have that moment.
And the young girls that followed them got to see women in circle, basically, together. But, they're moving, but they're in circle and they're contributing to the greater good of the entire village. And so they lost that ritual. And I think that we have lost all this. I always think it's important, like I've worked with a school, as an unschooler, true, but it's a school dedicated to learning through creativity and social justice. So, but the question we always ask when we sit down together is for the sake of what? So all this modernization, all this efficiency, all for the sake of what? Like, is it actually improving? I think there's enough data out there by all the positive psychologists who have studied happiness from 12 different dimensions that all of this stuff doesn't always matter for yielding a more meaningful and robust and satisfactory and happy life. So anyway, for the sake of what? So
I like that. It reminds me of at the 4-H prior to the RE conference last year, they had a quilting conference, and I watched these mostly women, I think it was all women, quilting, and they were there for a day or maybe 2 days, 2 full days, like 8 to 10 hour days. They worked hard in their quilting, but it was clearly a social environment. This is the thing that can be done at home very easily. It reminded me of my grandmother when she was cooking with my great aunts and sort of the community element that was involved there.
Correct. And quilting for African American community, for example, was a way of chronicling the history in ways without dying, and keeping the legacies.
The weaving of the images in the fabric? Or, yes. Okay.
Yeah, and so there were symbols. And, there was a way to keep the legacy alive of what their ancestry was as their, physical, emotional selves are being beaten to death. But let's not get political. What?
Exactly. I wonder about that. Like, I'm remembering my mom is she's the archive in our family. She's the storyteller because my grandfather, her dad, was the storyteller, and not only her own, but in the family's, but my father's side too. On both sides, as far back as you can go, she's the storyteller. Oh, wow. She's all, she's the point, the pin, the link pin. So, we don't have stories past my mom. I don't really remember them. We don't create those moments like I'd like to remember the lineage. And there's a lot of wonderful stories and power and energy and beautiful stuff that's back there that isn't easily accessed because we're missing that piece. I'd like to find a way to bring that back. Gray also talked
And
about
the oral tradition
Mhm.
has been also, I don't mean to interrupt you,
That's
but
right.
Peter, the oral tradition is that more sacred feminine tradition, right?
Yeah.
In the storytelling. And we have now prioritized the written language, right? And there's a whole book, Goddess in the Alphabet, that shows sort of this written language basically moved goddess and all that kind of the culture of the sacred feminine to the sides, to the margins, so that they could elevate this masculine paradigm. So I think these things are not unimportant when we go back. Like everything is sort of harkening back, even though we're having a windy road and conversation here. You initially started with sacred feminine. This is why it's important.
Right. I have a feeling we'll come back to it a few more times before
okay.
this conversation's over. Right? So Greg mentioned in the article about in this particular tribe, 4-year-olds were kind of the sort of the point at which the children were free to roam about the camp. They were free to handle tools and weapons, although sometimes they were dulled or they were child-sized or whatever. And I thought that was interesting. I think in the unschooling world, where we get out of the way and provide as much freedom as we can, and at the same time try to develop a safe container, that felt very familiar, that 4-year-old point.
I imagine.
This is just a totally wide open question, but in today's day and age, with so many different variables and things going on, what is that age? What does that age look like today? You know? And I know it depends where you live and where you're from.
It's really difficult to, I think it's difficult to recreate that scenario. But even my parents' generation, they grew up in New York City, on tough streets, but they got to play outdoors, unsupervised, until the lights came on, until it got dark and the street lights went on, and then it was time to get home. And every adult on the block would beat you if you didn't get back before dark. So there's your tribe right there. Yeah, there's your tribe. Because they were all parenting all the kids to keep them safe. And so I think, what is the age that freedom what is it?
Or what are the variables? Like how do you decide that? Like, so if you're in the tough streets of New York, maybe it's 12, or maybe the age has nothing to do with it, but it's tuning into.
I think it's tuning into the individual person, because I think there are things. I have a cautious kid and I have kind of a fearless kid. But my cautious kid has to be more courageous, right? Sometimes, because if someone's afraid, to try it requires a lot of courage. So would I say, okay, would I throw that person into their personal lines then prematurely, or would you sort of scaffold, Vygotsky style, right, into these spaces with some kind of older child, or right? So that's where, if you have shared values, you kind of let them have freedom as long as they know they're safe. Because I don't remember who said this, and somebody said this once, that the kids will go if they know that base is safe and stable. Like so if you're playing tag, imagine a tree is base. If I know that that's not going to move around, I can go as far as I can because I always know where that'll be, right? So you have to create conditions of safe around the children at all times. So what does it mean for this child to feel safe versus this child to feel safe? And in this collective of young people, and it could be all different ages, maybe they feel safe going out because there are some 12-year-olds when they're 4, right? But maybe all 4-year-olds, they don't really feel so great, and they want you, and you're thinking, you're supposed to feel free at 4 to be, and maybe because some families have slightly different values or different definitions of what is allowed, or I don't want to say allowed because then there's coercion and all these things, but what feels comfortable to their family might feel not comfortable to another family. So then that child can sense, right, these things. So what I feel is, if you could establish what the child is understanding as base, they will fly. They will fly because they're curious. All people, but particularly young people, children and young people, are so curious. They want to keep exploring. And so whatever they need to feel safe. Now, that doesn't mean to coddle them, right? That doesn't mean to hold them to base, like, okay, just stay right here on base the whole time. You want to, for me, I should say personally, I would want to encourage them to try, but I think, the developmental arc is so different across all different cultures, all different people, what feels comfortable for even within a family. So yeah, find base.
Who was the author that wrote about scaffolding?
Vygotsky. So,
Vygotsky.
Yeah, he's a psychologist,
okay.
Russian psychologist.
Sounds Russian.
Mm-hmm. And so we have, it's terrible what we do sometimes, but we have taken his work because he was Russian. The Cubans have a very good relationship with him. So I was very generously mentored by some of the folks that have worked with some of the original texts. But in the United States, we have sort of diluted a little bit of Vygotsky. He really talked about creativity and the arts and the idea of scaffolding, meaning that you are just opening up the possibility, the frame of possibility to somebody beyond the scope of what they understand at any given moment. Or as Kelly might say, you're riding people's edges, letting them ride a little bit their edges, but not trying to throw them off a cliff, right? That's not the point. The point is so that they can navigate it with as much grace and courage as that could arise and emerge from within.
Reminds me of when I used to listen to Dennis Miller sometimes, because he would always have these words that I'd have to look up afterwards. I remember in one short stint, he used Kierkegaard, who I knew of or had read, but Kierkegaard, disestablishmentarianism, and ubiquitous in the same like instant bang. And I'm like, okay, gotcha, exactly. Ubiquitous. I better look that one up. So it's always a treat when you talk because, you know, I want to get a pencil and write some things down and go look it up after. But I know I can ask you again. So that's a great thing about having our friendship. Gosh, there's so much. So you painted a great picture there for safety and base and really getting in touch with the self. So one thing we've always tried to do in our family with our kids is get in touch with the intuition, you know, and the internal knowing.
Correct.
And depending on, you know, your spiritual base, you know, whether that's universal or whether that's embodied in, you know, in the individual, we certainly have a universal approach to our thinking. But this knowing that transcends the moment, you know, the nurturing of intuition and as you like to say, the embodiment and feeling it at all levels. We're hoping that that's working with the kiddos, and we see many instances where it seems to be. So
absolutely. And they've learned, I mean, for me is that I think my deepest desire is to live this life according to my soul's guidance, right? And so that internal compass, I can navigate the world with my internal compass, with my intuition. And everybody can defines intuition differently. For me, it's knowing that...
I may have to quote you on that later. That'll be a little excerpt, to navigate the world by my internal compass. Yeah,
because, and I think intuition is one of the ways that speaks, for me, for example, my understanding of intuition is that it is, you know, divinity speaking through my humanity, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my soul, because I think my soul is timeless. I think all of our souls are timeless and eternal. And so you're navigating through this way. And for me, it speaks through the flesh. And I think our felt sensations and our emotions, especially as we feel them in our bodies, are indicative, are indications or indicators of when things are going off, or when things, or when we're feeling contracted and constricted. And I don't have any judgment against dark or shadow emotions or light. And I'm not, so Barbara Taylor Bradford talks about this in her latest book, you know, Walking Through Darkness. I don't remember the title, but, and she differentiates solar spirituality from lunar spirituality, right? And back to the sacred, masculine, feminine. Solar spirituality, the understanding is that you are always going for the light, for positive. So this is there's nothing wrong with this, but I think the New Age sort of ran with this a little bit. So you're going towards everything that's good. So if you're feeling sad, you want to do whatever you can, like, to move quickly out of it. And
it's part of our society, our culture right now.
Everything. Everything is to fix sad, but you can't fix sad or anger or disappointment, or let's not disappoint the kids, you know, like, and I have a tough family, but there was this Sinbad, you know, Sinbad.
Yeah.
He had this hysterical chat where stand-up piece where he said, now you give ribbons to every kid for participating. You've got this, and you've got most improved, and you've got, and he says, when I was growing up, if you sucked, you just sucked, right? And like, you would, because there's an internal desire to try to get better. Right. And then there's a satisfaction that nobody can take away from you. Right. Because you're not outsourcing your confidence. You're getting it by working and trying and effort, right? So and so that's my interpretation of Sinbad's little shtick there. But so then there's the solar spirituality, and then there's the lunar one. The lunar one ebbs and flows, and so sometimes, you know, you're in the dark, and you're having, and our emotions, when we feel them, are a great indicator of where we are at our point right now. It could mean that something needs to change. It could be just that there's ancient grief that we have not addressed, is being triggered, and wants to have its time, wants to have its full expression, so that you can burn through it, or you could use it and alchemize it, right? And then move it in a different direction. And you might have to be with it for more than 2 minutes. You know what I mean? More than 5 minutes. You might have to sit with that for a long period of time. I know that I have.
We're having the same thought right now.
Oh,
okay, how long do we have to sit?
Exactly.
That's enough. I've got a mountain of excitement and jubilation coming because
right, exactly.
A long period of sitting.
I know, exactly, right? What goodness awaits us.
Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Well, you're talking about intuition, and it reminded me of, you know, we live in a campground. We have a motorhome, and family lives in a motorhome. We travel around when we can, and we sit tight when we want to or need to. And the campground is tribe-like in a sense that the kids understand the surroundings. They get the lay of the land. They know where potential danger spots are. And they've learned how to hone their intuition here. Yes. At the same time, we don't have agreement necessarily within the tribe. I can't really count the folks here as a tribe, other than we have our being in common. Yes. And in many cases, there's a relaxed, casual atmosphere. It seems to be largely non-threatening. But it does require the kids to have to hone the skills in, because anybody can go camping. Correct. It doesn't just have to be people who have agreed to unschool, for example. So, you know, it is a bit of a safe container, yet safe enough that they have the run of the campground, and we know that they're in good hands, good safe space, and there are enough people that think like us around here that there are folks that will help, and at the same time, the kids still have to practice the intuition. So it's a nice halfway point to. It's not jumping into the streets of New York, but you know, it does. New York is not as bad as people think. I'm just saying, people. I love New York. One of my favorite cities. The interesting about New York, I had business in New Jersey, and we were staying at one of my favorite RV trips of all time. We were staying in Hoboken, just across the Hudson, with views, panoramic views of the skyline of Manhattan. It's fantastic. So on this particular day, Kelly and the kids wanted to go in to Central Park, which, as you know, is an undertaking. You know, to commit to actually just getting all the way up to 79th Street or whatever it was, and dropping the family off so that I could go to a meeting at Secaucus and go back and get up and come back. So on the way in, we had morning rush, and on the way back, we had afternoon rush, and we couldn't win. But I threw myself into it, and it's like, I mean, it was in that flow-like state that Dino talks about. Nothing bothered me. I had a buffer around my car that just could not get hit, no matter what. And I just flowed with it all, and I loved it. People cutting in and out, and the energy felt frenetic to the rest of the family. But I loved it. I just got pulled right into it. And everybody else, you know, my son was kind of with me on this. But get me into the park, and then give me home. You know, it wasn't necessarily their scene, but I loved it. No, I know it's only part of New York.
No, it is, but it's a thriving city. And I think that you do find your way. The landscape is really different. And so the rhythm is very different. But if you can use your intuition to tune into the rhythm and where people are, then you can sort of navigate the landscape with joy, really, right? It's instead of frustration and irritation, because that's also available.
I rely on that so much that I didn't even know I was doing it for a lot of years. But there was one sort of visceral feeling that sort of woke me up, that when I wasn't able to listen to it or hear it or use it, and I don't know what the reasoning was. It's just I can envision it. I can remember it clearly today. Walking into a room and not understanding what I don't understand. Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you can walk in and you just sort of, I don't know what's going on here, but everything feels off. You know, like I need to know this story or leave, or you know, just not knowing. That's a weird feeling, especially when you rely on your intuition a lot. You know, I'm entering a happy place, I'm entering an angry place. Sometimes it's just this confused, weird tension where you can't figure it out. And it was really my wake-up call as to how much I was leaning on that. skill or attribute.
And I think Jennifer Day probably talked about this last year at RE, but this electromagnetic field that comes off of people, right? Is you can sense it so quickly. And I think there are infinite number of things to say about it, but two quick things that sort of arose were, one is you can sense it and you might just have to drop the labels. You might have to tune in physically, viscerally, physiologically to what's happening, and trust the sense, when something pulls you back and contracts, you just trust it and follow, and that is kind of, when you're in an intuitive space, and I'll talk about flow because I think it relates to that. So that's, one is that drop the labels, stop trying to understand it all the time, drop into the body and sense your way through that. So that's one thing, and it's very, very easily felt. And the second thing, it's easily felt when you drop in, because you're intuiting from the flesh. The other thing is that if you're wanting to change the tenor of the environment, and you have tools to get yourself back into your heart and back into a good feeling space, not that I'm saying that you want to shift something that's negative, but if people are just irritated and you know that it's not functional or efficient or whatever you're trying, maybe you're trying to complete something together and it's not happening because there's all this happening.
Some dysfunction.
There's something. If you are able to tune in to yourself and get into your own good feeling space and then beam that out to other people, you then have the power to help shift the energetic flow of what's happening. Sometimes people don't even consciously know that things are changing, but they feel less antagonistic. Maybe they feel less defensive. Maybe they feel less irritated, less bored, apathetic. And it's just because somebody in the room is out of them is flowing this gorgeous, energy that, and then they can tune into that vibration.
We've all been around those people.
Yeah.
I don't know if we knew it at the time, but those people that are just magnetic.
You are those people.
Wow. There you see. Just get my energy pushing out there.
You are.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But Kelly, of course. When you're around those people, you feel it though. You feel sometimes a little happier, sometimes a little more clear. I feel more confident. Like in my weak moments, it reminds me of the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with kind of notion. So play up. Yeah. Play up and pick good ones.
Yeah.
But when I say good ones, good or bad, but people that exude that positive outlook or, their clarity on the best in life, and they feel like they can have it or that they should have it.
Or they're all in.
Or they're all in.
Even if it's a mess.
Right.
Right. Like I think that it's a little bit too Western clinical to think that everything is always going to be like skipping through daisies, right?
You were saying that earlier. Absolutely. Yeah. Like they try to get rid of the unhappy feelings all the time.
I think all of it, and that is where sort of goddess culture was wiped out. And we forgot that all is welcome. We're really trying to have the full expression of the human experience, not just this narrow slice of it. It's not that we don't want suffering to be, I don't also want to, right. This is not, and I'm not advocating suffering or any kind of the misery that people go through oppression and violence and all of that is, in my opinion, we should all collectively work towards eradicating. However, so all that extreme kind of stuff as a system of domination, right? So that we're using violence to have power over people, and we're using rape as an act of war, right? These are systems of domination where we're trying to eradicate people's sense of self-determination, their sense of self-realization, their sense of collective. We're changing the ethos of the space. So that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about disappointment or discouragement or malaise or anger or rage even. I remember when I had the kids were younger, I used to feel that I was being electrocuted. I had so much rage energy pouring through me. And whatever the acute scenario did not merit that kind of physical response. So I knew that other things were coming up through with this scenario. So something would happen to the kids, and it took everything in myself to like remove myself from the situation. So we would play games, but that's how we eventually evolved into 5-minute dance jams, because I said, okay, look, I have to get rid of this energy in a way that's productive without, chopping their heads off. So we we'd pick a song and we'd be crazy and we'd be silly. But in that way.
Does everybody join you in it?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Does Dino?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Not with his sticks.
Right.
No sticks.
No sticks. And what happened is that energy would move through me. And, like a lot of movement practitioners, movement meditation practitioners would say, Mother Earth will take this for you. Let her hold it. Let it pour out of you. Let her hold it. And she will alchemize it for you. Trust that she will compost it for you. So there's back to sacred feminine. And the second thing is that, Rivera 5 rhythms movement meditation practice says, if you put the body in motion, if you put the psyche in motion, it would heal itself. So if you move your body, all your psyche will heal itself, because a lot of the things that trigger us emotionally sometimes are just beliefs or conditioning, right? And so we get stuck in these kind of narratives that are antiquated or are destructive. But once you start moving your body, sometimes you get kind of a clarity that is, you can be unabashed in your confidence at that moment, because it's sourced from something deeper and wiser, your soul. So I don't know why I did all that, but yeah.
I like the Gabriel Roth and the 5 rhythms. You told us about that last year, and I think that is really incredible stuff. Yeah. I know I feel free and very liberated when I do that, and I rarely will make myself sort of that vulnerable
to dance.
To dance, not like that.
Come on, free form movement. Yeah. Yes, where the choreography arises from your soul. Like you're not following somebody else's dictates. You're letting your body do its dance.
We end up doing it more and more. It's impromptu, and it's just eclectic and crazy.
Oh, I know the kids do it all the time.
Yeah. We join them. There's only so much room in the RV.
I know.
People can get hurt.
I know. Yeah, right.
But we still do it. It's more of a bouncing up and down, more of a pogo-like thing.
Yeah,
which is about my range of choreography to begin with. So that's occasional sprinkler or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen you and your sister go at it. I've seen those dance moves.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We have a lot of fun. Well, let's do that at RE this year too. Again,
definitely.
That's awesome. Awesome, good stuff. Anything else on your mind these days?
No, dance. If we're ending with a dance party, there could be no better ending, right?
Well, let's make that happen.
Yeah.
Well, that is the plan. I think at this point, Monday night will be a talent show and some dance, and that's always popular.
Excellent.
Talent show for sure. Last year, we had a lot of people in the dance, and we got a little crazy.
Yeah.
It was the day before my birthday, so I had a little birthday celebration there, a little singing and surprise there. That was fun. So I was definitely dancing. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Everybody dances. That's right. So this has been a real treat.
Thank you. Yeah,
me
too.
Appreciate this conversation. And, it was very simple. Instructions were, let's just have a chat.
Yes.
And let it free flow. That we did. Hopefully people who haven't met Melissa now have a chance to at least put a name and a face together, and you get to know her more at Rethinking Everything. I also probably should have introduced the notion that you'll be heading up leading the Sacred Feminine content at RE 2015. So we're really excited about that also. And in the open space style, we'll kickstart it. We'll offer some thoughts and wisdom like you're doing now, share some stories. And then we'll have an opportunity to break out and take deeper dives into any one of these subcategories that Melissa's brought up today, or whatever comes up from the conference.
Whatever emerges organically from the conversation, because open space really is about this fertile space for everybody to have cross-pollination, right? We're all in dialogue together.
I thought of one thing we have to talk about, Red Tent.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the container, I want to call it the container, but how does Red Tent work symbiotically with the Sacred Feminine this year?
Well, I think, the history of the Red Tent is that women would, in tribal context or villages, would gather to care and tend one another. And because women that spend a lot of time together tend to cycle similarly, when they had their moon cycles, they would enter the tent and the same way the women did when they went to the water. They would share stories, they would take care of one another. And then the tasks of the village would be taken over by other people who weren't cycling at that time, or young women who were not in there, or elder women, right? And so there was this flow of story and soul sharing and nourishment that fed people, women, so that they could then, sort of be, it's almost like Nicole Daedone, who is the founder of One Taste and the practice, the leader of one of the practices of orgasmic meditation, is that she says, orgasm fills us up, right? It fills our well. And so we know that to live a healthy, thriving lifestyle, you eat certain foods, right? But these are, and they're all medicine, and they're wonderful things. You drink water, and you move your body. And these are things that you source from the outside. But orgasm is the one that fills you up, fills up your well from the inside. So in that same way, the Red Tent operated as a space to nourish women. And I think my understanding of, you guys decide how it's going to be used, but my understanding, it just is a sacred space that is held for people to go if the conference gets overwhelming and they need a little space, if they need to have a conversation with somebody that's a little private, if they need to be quiet, or be in kind of meditation or prayer, or if they want to have some kind of simple ritual where they're noting, like something happened that was transformational, but it doesn't need to be broadcast in the entire in sort of public spaces. You have this private moment that you can take to do that. So I think my understanding is that it would be held as a sacred space. I don't know that a lot of events are happening in that space. That's because it's a space, so people can come in at any time of the day and have their moment of quiet, take a minute to breathe, do a little movement, have a little sharing, heart-to-heart sharing, and tend our souls.
That's perfect. That's the way we had envisioned it. So great to know that we're on track. Looking forward to that. So we will have Red Tent again at this year's Rethinking. So thank you for everything. You guys have been terrific. Thanks for your help last year and your friendship and all the inspiration and wisdom you guys always share. So everybody, Melissa Rivera, her wonderful family who you will see at the conference. And thank you for sharing. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much.
That's awesome.